Episode 37. It's time to get ready for some enchanted insights into the life of a private client solicitor. We're going to get rid of those misconceptions about private client law and get to the truth. So episode 37 today, which I'm very excited about, my lucky number. Today I've got Emma Geale from Reeve joining me today as my esteemed guest. So Emma, please introduce yourself and then we'll get into it for today.
Hello, so I'm Emma Geale. I'm a principal associate at Mills & Reeve, the private client team, which we'll obviously talk about today. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, we will see how that goes.
So, seems weird to introduce what I do, knowing that I'm not about to talk about that, but there we go.
Yeah, I know. So we do have some interesting things to talk about today. I know when we first spoke about you coming on, we wanted to do a bit of a behind the scenes almost into what it's really like to be a private client solicitor, and I know a lot of people are really interested. So if you are here with us today, please drop us a message. Any questions that you've got for Emma, let us know, and I will hopefully see them come up in the comments box and I can ask her. So first of all, we're going in hard. Okay, so private client law, right? We've got a reputation for being dry and technical. Okay, so how does the reality of your practice compare to that perception?
Yeah, I think it's very different than the perception a lot of the time. I think you're right. It does have that reputation as being dry and technical. You can imagine piles of old deeds up the walls and like dark, stuffy room with people talking about death all the time. And there's aspects of that, obviously. We do still advise people about what happens on their death, but I think there's a more modern private client world evolving now, which is more aligned with perhaps the corporate world as well. So a lot of what I do is actually sits between a kind of private client and corporate sphere. So thinking about what I do for business owners and transition of wealth to next generation, and actually spending more time drafting like articles of association and shareholders agreements and things like that to deal with that succession, as opposed to like just wills and trust documents and things like that. So it's definitely an evolving and kind of more modern area of practice than I think it has as a reputation. It's a really kind of interesting area. It is technical. I'm not going to tell you it's not, but actually for me, that's one of the things that I find the most interesting about it, that there's kind of constantly stuff going on. The budget's happening imminently. So we've got like that excitement going on in the world. So it's not, an antiquated, really stuffy area of profession anymore. And we've got some really cool clients. So, you might think of them often being elderly. Sometimes they are, but actually there's lots of kind of younger business owners. I do a lot of work for tech entrepreneurs and things like that. And obviously the sports people and people in media and entertainment. So it isn't really that, antiquated regime that people might think it would be.
Yes, I see. And which aspects do you find the most engaging? I mean, is it the interesting clients you have, or is it the type of work, or a combination of both?
I think it's a bit of everything, really. So definitely the technical aspect of it, that I quite like the challenge. I find it interesting. Every week there's something that comes up that I don't know the answer to, and I have to do a bit of a dig around and find something out and really get into the law side of it. So I know a lot of areas of legal practice, there isn't actually that much law in it. If there's something that's transactional, for example, or some litigation you might be negotiating, but actually what I do is often, you go back to the case law, you go back to the legislation. It actually is the black letter law a lot of the time. So I quite like that aspect of it. I also like the client aspect of it, working for individuals as opposed to corporates, having that kind of client relationship and actually feeling like the advice that you give is kind of really matters to an individual that's behind it. So there's definitely that to it as well. It's always exciting when the clients are high profile, but actually some most exciting work can come out of, perhaps normal people as opposed to the people who you see in the papers.
Yes, I see. Interesting. I was going to say something then about high profile individuals and it's just fallen out of my head. So that's not great. I'm sure it'll come back. I'm sure it will come back to me. So I know one of the things that you are keen on discussing is kind of imposter syndrome, which I know is still something that everybody's banging on about. But I think, more than anywhere, it is especially prevalent in your profession. So you've got obviously your complex tax regimes and all of this technical stuff. So how did you overcome any imposter syndrome that you might have been feeling when you first came into this role?
Yeah, I think as going back to the point that it's a really technical area of practice, it takes a long time to kind of get to grips with everything. And like I say, I don't know everything and have to go back to the legislation and look things up. And so kind of accepting that is the position. I think it's probably one step on the journey. So as part of my training after I qualified, I did spend 2 years doing additional qualifications in order to help build that technical aspect. So I don't think there are many areas of legal practice where you kind of have to do that. That really did help in terms of making me feel like I had the technical backing to advise clients about their matters. And then I think the imposter syndrome thing is definitely an area that is difficult to overcome. I think it took me until quite a few years into practice to feel like I'd got that down. We did have some really interesting training a few years ago about the different types of imposter syndrome that people experience. And actually, I think that really helped me to reframe it. And so I remember at the time I'd just been asked by someone in another team to supervise some work for them. And I was like, what? Like, why me? Why do they think that I would be the person to help them with this? But then kind of realizing when I stepped back and thought, like, what is it that imposter syndrome flag is trying to achieve? And I actually think it was just trying to protect me. You know, didn't want to make a fool of myself in front of someone that I hadn't worked with before. Or what if they asked me a question and I didn't know the answer and they'd come to me for help? And so just kind of accepting that, you know, I don't have to know the answer all the time, but also it's my brain trying to protect me from making a fool of myself, and just saying, right, okay, yeah, the imposter's jumped up, but I can accept it. I don't have to, you know, it just is what it is. And so kind of accepting that was quite helpful for me. So, you know, I'm not without my imposter syndrome moments, but I can see them and go, okay, fine, and move on, rather than like dwell on it, I suppose.
Yeah, it's almost like having that voice on your shoulder going, why are you doing this? You don't know what you're doing. Come back. You know, we're gonna stay here where it's safe. Like, we're not going out there because we might not know out there. That could be terrifying. So yes, I think that is a really good lesson, actually, to be aware of the fact that it's happening, and then, you know, shushing that voice when it's not helpful.
Yeah, and it took a long time to build the kind of confidence more broadly as well. And as that confidence has grown, the imposter jumps up less often. And so I think it took until I was maybe 5 years PQE until I actually felt like I had enough of a handle on everything to feel confident. And actually before then, I'd been advising clients on my own, I'd been doing client meetings on my own, and was comfortable with it. But actually that full confidence in what I was doing did take, you know, a good few years after qualification.
Yeah.
And kind of expect, so and I often say to our juniors, you don't have to have this at day one. Like, you're looking at me now, 8 years PQE, 10 years into doing this job. This is going to take a while. Don't kind of think that I'm some sort of, you know, someone on a pedestal that doesn't struggle with this and hasn't struggled with this. It has been a long time in the making.
I was just going to ask you, actually, what advice you might have for lawyers like feeling that way as well. So I guess, like, you don't know it all, and that's okay, would be the first piece of advice.
Exactly.
What else would you say?
I think one of the best pieces of advice I received, particularly when doing client meetings on my own early days, was actually just, you can say, that's a really good question. I'm going to have a think about it and come back to you. Particularly in the area of law that I operate in, private clients, they quite like to know that they've challenged you a little bit, and that you know, they've asked you something that's difficult. You're not just, you know, batting off anything to them. You know, you're actually really thinking it through and actually, you know, taking the time to engage with them about something. So I think that's always a top tip I give when the juniors start doing meetings on their own. And I think, yeah, just that same point of, it takes time. You don't have to know everything. I don't know everything. Please don't look at people higher up the chain than you and think that we are, you know, some sort of, you know, on a pedestal or whatever, because we all suffer with the same sort of stuff and have kind of overcome some of it to get to where we are today. But there are still, you know, there's still moments of doubt.
Of course, you're only human, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And my point I was actually going to say earlier was, in your profession, you can really tailor your advice to those clients, because, you know, you obviously get to know them quite well, and they have their bespoke matters that they come to with you. And yeah, I guess there's much more scope for saying, oh, do you know what, that's actually hasn't cropped up before, so I'm going to go and find out. And it probably does make them feel like, oh, that's really cool, because I'm
special.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's it.
Exactly.
Talking of feeling special, do you have high profile clients? Like, do you like have your own way of kind of like handling them? Do you feel like you might do? How does that happen?
It's an interesting one. So I think there probably is some difference in that a lot of the celeb type clients have people running things for them, so you don't necessarily get the face time with them, so it's harder to build that rapport with people. So that takes kind of a bit of an extra challenge, and often you get, you know, a lot of the discussion goes on separately with the other advisors, and then you kind of just get the, okay, this is the moment of advice, rather than having the back and forth beforehand. And sometimes it can be quite difficult to get those instructions because people are very busy. I've been trying to get will instructions from a musician for about 3 years, I think. And I think we finally got to agree to what we're going to do, but I now just need to have like the Zoom call with them to actually get those instructions, which will be fun. But actually for a lot of the time, it ends up being the same as normal stuff. Particularly a lot of the famous people that I have advised tend to be a lot of footballers. We have a really big sports sector at the firm. So definitely had a few footballers across my desk, but I don't really know anything about football. So it's really surreal because
they are.
I know you're really famous, and I know you just got back from playing the Euros or something, but I don't know who you are. So those ones are always like, surreal. So in that way, I just treat them like a normal client, and actually probably they quite like not being kind of fangirled over. So
yeah, I should say so. Although, like, you definitely have something to say if Taylor Swift came by your office, right?
Oh my god, yeah, like dream. That would be the absolute dream.
It would be.
I am available.
We'll try and manifest that for you.
Yeah, if anyone can like hook me up, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, that would be really good. So talk to me about like a particularly challenging case that you might have had, obviously, you know, anonymized, and how you like managed to navigate that.
Yeah, so I think there's been quite a few over the years, and like having said that, a lot of my work is kind of business owner specific, and in that kind of quasi corporate world, the one that springs to mind in terms of like particularly challenging ones that I've had to deal with is a big trust restructuring matter that we're doing at the moment. So it's like a huge project, kind of 500 million's worth of assets, 2 landed estates, 7 trusts, different jurisdictions, lots of kind of engaging with a leading King's Council in terms of some work that we're doing there. There's just a million moving parts. So I think that's really been a challenging one for me, feeling at times a bit like I'm project managing something rather than doing the actual lawyering. So there's kind of lots of things going on, and so just trying to juggle that alongside everything else, you know, quite demanding clients. They're our biggest client at the moment in terms of the private client team at the firm. They should get some priority, but also it's quite difficult to juggle that volume of work alongside kind of dealing with other things. There have been times on this project where I've done kind of 4 days a week solid on this one thing, and then saved 1 day a week for kind of everything else, which, you know, as a private client lawyer, is very unusual because we're often kind of chopping and changing. We're not, you know, the corporate lawyers who work on one big project for weeks straight and then kind of go on to the next one. So that's definitely been a challenge, and kind of fitting that into my kind of wider workload. And it's certainly one of the most complicated things that I've ever worked on. All of the trusts that were set up back in the 60s, and so really, really old drafting have been restructured every kind of 10 years. So this is definitely the more old school private client, lots of boxes of deeds type work, you know, as a landed estate. So lots of kind of agricultural land, big stately homes, that sort of thing. So it's been some quite nice elements to it from that, but definitely a challenging job to work on.
Yeah, but then on the flip side, once you have, you know, finally navigated your way through that, you know, you'll be like, well, this next one is really simple. They've only got one trust to do.
I know, exactly.
And everything else will be a walk in the park.
In fairness, going back to the confidence piece, I think actually being involved in this job has been a real kind of, not turning point necessarily, because I think that was probably a couple of years back, but a really good kind of solidification of my confidence levels. I remember picking this job up. I'd just come back from my secondment that I did with HMRC, and I got kind of launched straight into this and walked into the first conference with council with this very, very, very impressive KC and held my own in that room. And I was like, hell yeah, I can do this. I'm not kind of sitting here trying to keep up. I'm actually like, I'm doing it. I'm talking about it. I'm, you know, having kind of quips back and forth with these like really impressive other lawyers and with the clients and things like that. So I think that was this. I think one of the reasons that it stands out for me as being a really complex bit is actually the fact that the confidence that's come with it and how I've just been able to like handle it, basically.
Yeah. Oh, I love that for you. That's brilliant. Yeah.
I love
so all aspects, you know, for your for your lawyer knowledge and all the technical know-how and your confidence piece. Yeah, what a great piece to work on. Amazing. I remember seeing quite some time ago, you posted on LinkedIn about managing like the emotional aspects of your work. And I think specifically we're talking about, I can't remember exactly, but there was somebody in hospital that I think you went to see. So how do you kind of manage when you're working with families and kind of managing that grief piece, balancing your own emotions as well at the same time?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting area of private client practice and something that's changing quite a lot, and our kind of attitude to it is changing. And I think in prior times, perhaps in times with less of a focus on well-being, that we might have kind of brushed it under the carpet or thought, what does it matter what we feel about any of this? But actually, so many of the clients that we're interacting with are going through really traumatic things, whether that's a terminal diagnosis, whether that is the death of a loved one, whether that is, just generally kind of having to rebuild life after a traumatic event. And actually, that can have such an impact on us as individuals. So kind of making sure that we're aware of that and kind of mindful of it. And I think for me, like obvious kind of ones that spring to mind are the times when I've had to go and do deathbed wills in hospital for people who, hooked up to life support and being able to kind of nod and shake their head and that's about it, and dying pretty soon after that. I need to acknowledge that it's hard. And I think that's kind of the first step in it, is that, you shouldn't just have to then go straight back to the office and get stuck into anything else. It's okay to go have a cry in the loos, like been there, done that. And so just knowing that does take some kind of dealing with. And I think firms are getting better at it. I think particularly actually in the family space, they have kind of got better at that. And I know that the firm here, we do a lot of work in that area. And there's a lot of people on LinkedIn who talk about it as well. So people like Anne-Marie Carvalho, who is now, she was a lawyer, she's now turned therapist. She does therapy for lawyers, knowing kind of what lawyers are going through and the experiences that they're having, and kind of how you then navigate those difficult discussions and make sure that you're looking after yourself too. So I think that's really kind of changing the industry a little bit. And that, as I said, that is becoming a more prominent thing in family law, and from there kind of branching out into other areas like private client, where we are dealing with, grieving people, I think terminal diagnoses, or people who deal with personal injury matters, where actually some of the content is really quite distressing, and again dealing with people going through difficult periods. So I think the legal industry is changing in a good way in that regard, but it's just definitely something that we should have in mind, and not just expect that we can all just jump back up and crack on into the next thing, because it's that individual element and advising that client in that moment, but actually what it could also trigger for you. So I know that that I found really difficult was talking to a client who just lost someone to cancer. And for me, that brought up a lot of feelings about, experiences I'd had in my past with losing family to cancer. And so there were too many similarities in the story that was happening. And I remember having to fight quite hard to keep it together in the meeting and just be, the advisor and be empathetic and supportive, but without just being like, I'm just going to go have a cry now. So, but it does impact us, and so just acknowledging that, I think, is the key starting.
Yeah, and that is so important that is happening within the legal space, because a couple of my best friends are actually therapists. So it's interesting you say about therapy, and I know they have oftentimes weekly supervision, which means that they have to check that they're okay, right? They're okay to give advice to their clients, and that they're not going through anything that might be particularly triggering or that might impact the advice that they give. And I don't see that really as being too dissimilar for lawyers, right? You need to make sure that you're okay, because if you're not in a good space, then your advice could be skewed, I guess.
Definitely. And if you're not taking on and processing some of that stuff, it can all just compound, and it comes up eventually later. You can only shut it down for so long. And so in the same way, as you say, it's important for therapists to have their therapeutic supervision. We're kind of starting to see more of that in the legal sector, and I think that's a really good way that things are going. I'd like to see more of it in the private client world, and kind of acknowledging the impact on it.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, didn't see where this conversation was going to go today, but it's fascinating. Yeah, it really is. Other than changes in that respect, kind of emerging trends or changes do you think might happen in private client law, in the future? Anything you think?
I think the tax changes are kind of often the biggies. So, we've got the budget on the horizon, so there are changes happening there. We're seeing people adapting their behaviour now in advance of that, in order to make use of the ways that the rules are today. And so we've definitely got some kind of changes coming down the line from that, and we will wait and see what they look like on the 30th of October. And so I don't really know what that's going to look like, and so I can't say what those shifts will be, but I expect it will be much of the same things, restructuring planning a little bit differently because of rates changing or reliefs being lost or reliefs being capped. So we'll definitely be kind of seeing some changes there, but it's sort of par for the course, I think, in that budgets happen regularly. We haven't had a very exciting private client budget really, other than the one earlier this year, as in a long time. So it could be quite a big shift, this one, but that tends to just be, governments come in, change things, shake things up a bit, move on. But I don't think there's anything huge coming down the line more broadly in terms of the legal aspect of it. There's talk about digital wills and things like that, but we shall see how that ends up. I don't think it's going to hugely change practice, but I think the key thing for me that I've kind of flagged is that well-being point and the kind of appreciation of us as lawyers, private client lawyers, as opposed to just advisors that don't have a person behind them.
Robot advisors.
Exactly.
Yes, no, we do not know what the budget has in store for us. Yes, time will tell. So before we wrap up, let us know if you do have any questions, guys, because everybody's been very quiet, but that is okay because we are having very serious conversations.
It's fun too.
Tell me about some fun stuff that might have happened in your career so far. Obviously, keeping it all confidential, or anything like really surprising or unusual, or what people might not expect that might happen to you so far.
Fun stuff I've been up to. So I think one thing about private client lawyers, there's a lot of business development and networking stuff. So there's quite a lot of, fun events going on, drinks on rooftops in the summer, which was quite nice this year. I think there were 3 days running that I went to 3 different rooftops to have drinks, which was, nice. And then, being invited to rugby matches and things like that for BD activities. I think I always quite enjoy visiting clients' properties and estates and things like that. Although I did end up visiting, I wasn't expecting to, but ended up visiting a quarry probably about a year ago now, and did not wear appropriate footwear. And so I managed to be kind of ankle deep in mud, which was fun. And then have to go through a 3-hour meeting with the trustees. With being very so that was in some ways fun. But I think,
have you gone to any famous people's houses?
Famous people's houses? I don't think so. I think most of the famous people have tended to be either virtually in the last few years, or kind of prior to that would often kind of come in for a meeting at kind of we'd maybe have a meeting at the end, their kind of key contact. So normally you've got like the trusted advisor person who often is kind of maybe on the more financial side of things and helps them kind of run their lives in almost kind of quasi family office sort of role, and then kind of get together for a roundtable meeting. So those have tended to be that sort of thing. But
oh well, I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed for you for not only Taylor Swift but also an invitation to one of our houses. Let's aim big. Let's aim big, why not? Why not? So how can people find you if they want to? You're on LinkedIn all the time, right? Is that the best place to get hold of you?
Yeah, LinkedIn. I'm all over LinkedIn. That's my kind of main place to be these days in terms of finding me. I've obviously email as well. All my details are on either on LinkedIn or on the firm's website. So get in touch if you want to talk about private client, mental health, well-being.
Taylor Swift. All of that. Any of the above. Well, we'll make sure that we put your contact details in the show notes so people can get hold of you if they so wish. And that's about it for us this week. We've got a break next week, but the week after, which will be episode, I said this was 37, right? There's going to be 38. Yes, that's what I've got. I can't believe that this has been going on for so long. I have Kyle coming. He's from all the way from America, so that's quite exciting. He's having to get up very early for this episode, and we are going to be discussing all things legal tech and automations and how to basically make your BD run smoother and all that kind of fun stuff. So do tune in for that one. It's going to be a slightly later time at 1 p.m. because I was feeling a little bit kind and I thought I wouldn't make him get up like in the middle of the night or something. So this is always a challenge with my clients across the water. So thanks for coming, Emma, today. It's been lovely to chat to you in real life at last.
It's been lovely to talk to you too. Thanks for having me.
You are more than welcome. So that's us for now. Go and have some lunch. Catch you later.